Hector Berlioz really is a person apart. He doesn't fit into any normal category. He is somebody who grew a bit like a mushroom out of the ground, out of the soil of the Dauphiné. I mean, he didn't come from a musical family. His father was the local doctor in La Côte-Saint-André, a small town with a fantastic view across the plain of the Dauphiné to the Vercors and the Chartreuse, the pre-Alps that lead you into Switzerland. And he's very much a man of the earth. You feel with Berlioz that nearly all his music has roots in the soil of the Dauphiné, of where he grew up. I find it very moving. I mean, I've been visiting La Côte-Saint-André for the last 30 years, and the festival, the Berlioz Festival, which has now grown into something really quite significant, was really not so important a few years ago. When I was director of the musical director of the Opéra de Lyon, we used to go occasionally from Lyon to the Côte-Saint-André and play in the market square, sous les Halles. But it didn't have a great deal of following. And that's, in a way, that's the defining characteristic of Hector Berlioz, that nul prophète dans son pays, you're never recognized, or the tendency is not to be recognized by your own compatriots. And the French have always had a certain reticence towards Berlioz. It's beginning to change now, but certainly in my youth and when I was director of the Opéra de Lyon, Berlioz was regarded as somehow exotic, a little bit of a rule breaker, which he was to some extent, and not quite the real deal from a French point of view. And that puzzles me, because to me Berlioz is quintessentially a Frenchman. His response to French people, to the French countryside, towards French literature, towards French culture in general, is that of a patriot. Yes, of course he had his heroes who were, for example, Shakespeare. He was passionate about Virgil. He was passionate about Goethe. But the truth is that Berlioz was much more appreciated outside France in his lifetime than he was inside France. And I puzzle over that. What is it that has held him back? And I can think of two or three reasons. Number one, I think, is that the fact that Berlioz was obliged to earn his crust, earn his living, partly by being a critic, confused the French public, because they could have accepted him as an artist, a romantic artist, a crazy artist, but to have him being a critic as well, somebody who was very severe in his criticism, confused them. That was one thing. The other thing is that the French cultural education is very oriented towards literature and towards painting and not towards music. And I think it's true to say, without being disrespectful, that the French, who after all are quintessentially chauvinistic people, I mean, Monsieur Chauvin was a Frenchman, and they are so proud of their literature, their painting, their sculpture, their haute couture, their cuisine, everything, their language. It doesn't extend to French music. And it's a curious enigma. Why should that be? Why should the music of Rameau in the middle of the 18th century, the music of Berlioz at the start of the 19th century, the music even of Debussy and Ravel, Fauré, why should that always be slightly pushed down in relation to Italian music, in German music? It doesn't seem right, because it's one of the glories of French culture, and Berlioz is, to me, the essence of French Romanticism. And I also feel that had he not written a note of music, he would be recognized today still as a great writer. I think that the essence of Berlioz as a writer comes in the articles that he wrote, the critical articles he wrote, and in his letters. And in his letters, he's writing directly from his heart to his friends, to his family, or to young musicians whom he's trying to guide. And you get such a feeling of the intensity of his personality, his scrupulous honesty as a man, his passion for his music, and his willingness to be very detailed in planning his concerts, how they should physically be deployed on a stage. I mean, there's a letter that I have at home when a young conductor from Bordeaux is asking Berlioz for advice as to how to present his music. And Berlioz goes into some detail. He's very considerate. He says, well, it's very important when you start rehearsing that you start with partiels, with separate rehearsals for individual sections of the orchestra, rather than just have the whole orchestra there. And he's very specific over, for instance, on which different levels, on which different risers you should place the orchestra so that the wind instruments come over the strings and don't get lost. And interestingly, about how to place a chorus, he says, don't place a chorus behind the orchestra where you have difficulty in hearing them. Place them in front of the orchestra, and they have the back to the conductor, but you then need to have a sous-chef, an under conductor, who relays the beat to them. And I've tried that many times, and it works beautifully. So on the one hand, you ask who is Berlioz as the man. He is somebody who is a dreamer, a rêveur, somebody who has this enormous richness of fantasy and imagination. And on the other hand, he's somebody with an almost Cartesian attention, gives attention to detail in an almost Cartesian way.